This is Cast of Wonders, the young adult fiction podcast featuring stories of the fantastic. Welcome. Episode 592. I'm Catherine Inskip, your editor and host. Today, Cast of Wonders is bringing you another Summer Spotlight episode, part of our series featuring award-nominated authors and stories. Our story for today is Flawless by Frances Hardinge, which was first published in 2013 in the short story collection Twisted Winter, edited by Catherine Butler. Frances Hardinge was brought up in a sequence of small, sinister English villages and spent a number of formative years living in a Gothic-looking, mouse-infested hilltop house in Kent. She studied English language and literature at Oxford, fell in love with the city's crazed, archaic beauty, and lived there for many years. Whilst working full-time as a technical author for a software company, she started writing her first children's novel, Fly By Night, and was with difficulty persuaded by a good friend to submit the manuscript to Macmillan. She has now written 11 books for children and young adults, including Cuckoo Song, which won the Robert Holdstock Award for Best Fantasy Novel at the British Fantasy Awards, and The Lie Tree, which won the Costa Book of the Year 2015. Her most recent book is Island of Whispers, a collaboration with award-winning illustrator Emily Gravett. Frances is seldom seen without her hat and is addicted to volcanoes. This story is narrated by Kat Day. Kat Day is about 4/5 scientist and 1/5 witch, it varies, sometime writer and most of the time editor. Notably, she's assistant editor at Pseudopod, where she does her best to wrangle the tentacles into some semblance of order. She's very happy to have been asked to do this narration because, firstly, this story is fabulous, and secondly, it means she's now narrated for all the EA pods and thus has filled up her escape artist narrator bingo card. Listen for her shouting "House" and look her up on Blue Sky at chronicleflask.catday.com. This story comes with a content warning for neglect and dysfunctional relationships. And now, we've a tale to tell.
Flawless by Frances Hardinge, narrated by Kat Day. When people stay in hotel rooms, they suddenly turn into toddlers. Weird, creative, screwed-up toddlers. Let's smear jam on the wall. Let's leave apple cores in the drawers. Let's hide used nappies behind the radiator so they fill the whole room with the smell of cooked poo. Hello, whoever cleans this room. I've left you a surprise. Maybe they think there's some hidden handle we pull to flush the room clean, but there isn't. The only handles are Mum, occasional Kev from the village, and me. Kev's just occasional, and Mum has everything else to do, so cleaning is mostly my job, particularly during the school holidays. Cleaning a room is like being that legend guy who pushed a rock up a hill again and again. While you're scrubbing at the gribble, most of the time you can't even tell if you're making any difference. Nothing's ever perfect. Your eye adjusts. The closer you get to perfection, the better your gaze learns to pick out the stains and marks. When I've finished a room, I always step into the corridor for a moment, taking in the spotted walls, the gingery time stains on the mock brass electric chandeliers. Then I enter the room again, and for one moment, it is perfect. It gleams like it's just been taken out of its packaging. That never lasts. Next day, there will be inexplicable boot marks on the curtains, and somebody will have tried to cook soup in the kettle. I don't know why they bother. After all, we already have a weird, creative, screwed-up toddler of our own. Dill is 2 years old and tall for his age, tall enough to reach door handles. He has a rubbery little mouth and big, wet, blue eyes. He wants to hit everything in the world against everything else. And if you don't let him, his eyes get wetter and his scream goes right through your brain. He's my brother and I love him, of course I do, but sometimes loving him feels like just one more thing I do because it's my job. He adores clean rooms. He rushes around them like some grimy, stumpy spirit of undoing, throwing pot plants on the floor and stamping on biscuit packs. Once he left a toy truck in one of the teacups with a live slug in the driver's seat. I am not making this up. And he's 2, so whatever he does is my fault. Once, I dared to suggest to Mum that maybe Dill was too hyper. But no, apparently he's just being a boy and letting off steam. I didn't ask what was supposed to happen to my steam. No, I just swallow it down so that I can be the nice smiley girl at reception and Mum's little helper. Or at least I did until this winter when the snows came and changed everything. We're not exactly a winter destination. Our hotel is on the cliff path with views down to Winmouth, fading Spa Town, on one side, and Creve, failing fishing village, on the other. From October onwards, the wind from the North Sea does its best to blow us somewhere more sensible inland. It always fails, but I'm rooting for it. Low season means more free time for me, but this winter I spent every spare minute wrestling with my GCSE work. Mum didn't stop me, but whenever she caught me studying, her face went neutral, and I knew what she was thinking. Mum has always wanted me to leave school after my GCSEs and work in the hotel. Worse, I know it isn't just because she needs the help. She thinks I'm wasting my time. She doesn't think I'm smart enough to bother with university. She thinks I'd drop out or waste 3 years of my life for nothing but a big fat debt and an unclassified degree. I didn't tell her how badly I was doing. I didn't tell her that my brain froze up whenever I tried to prepare coursework. Blank paper, blank screen. Time and again, I lost the staring competition. A barrier in my head stopped me filling them with words. I might as well have tried to write across the sky. By December, I was going spare. The snow arrived one evening by stealth. First, tiny ice crumbs spiralled down, flecking my lashes and sleeves while I took out the rubbish bags. After dusk came small, soft tufts that melted on the sills and damp tarmac as soon as they landed. Then followed big, fat flakes, blue with a late evening light. Doors, windows, just a whirl of snow. Sorry, we are not receiving transmission from the world at present. You are between channels. Next morning, when I peered out of the window of my attic room, the sheer beauty of the world outside knocked the breath out of me. There was thick snow everywhere, heaped up on the windward side of the cars and buildings. It hung over the edge of the cliff in a smooth, crazy, cartoon way. The sky seemed full of sun. The snow was so white you could feel it throughout your head, like toothache, but without the pain. For half an hour I sat there looking at it, completely happy. It was the white I'd been scrubbing to find under the chipped china and worn-out tiles. Perfect. Flawless. Of course, it didn't stay that way. Dog walkers, hikers, postmen, delivery men, they all started to rut and spoil my beautiful snow. The buggies from the surrounding golf course took their usual shortcut through our land to get back to their club hut, leaving deep tracks. Dill had never seen snow properly before. He wanted to zigzag all over it and fall in it and throw it. Most of all, he wanted to spoil it. He seemed to find every pure, beautiful patch and then take pleasure in stamping it into slush. "Keep an eye on him," said Mum. I took my history book outside and leant against the footpath stile near where he was playing. I couldn't study, though. I had to watch Dill as he scuffed my gorgeous snow and warbled in the tooth-edgy falsetto. Suddenly the whole scene felt like the symbol of my life. She must have come up along the coastal path behind me, but I didn't hear her approach. There was no soft, powdery huff, huff, huff of feet stirring snow. All I knew was that suddenly there was another figure leaning over the fence, watching Dill. It was a woman in a pale blue coat, with silvery fake fur around the neck and hood. I thought she looked Swedish, with her pale lashes and pure gold hair. Her face was tanned, but I wondered whether it was a skiing holiday tan, not a beach tan. I realised that I was blocking the stile and moved hastily, but she carried on staring over the fence. I waited for the usual inane comments that Dill draws out of adults. He's having fun there, isn't he? Wish I was his age. But the silence stretched. He's my brother, I said. It was weird to start a conversation that way, but all I could think of to do was to answer the routine remarks that hadn't been made. Then can't you stop him doing that? Answered the woman, without looking at me. Her tone held the suppressed frustration that I often felt when watching Dill. When she glanced at me at last, her small frown melted away, as if my face had mirrored her own feelings. No, I said, I can't. Mum lets him do whatever he wants. Her irises were dark at the rim, but silvery grey near the pupil. In contrast, her lashes were shockingly white. As we locked gazes, I felt the woman enter my head. As a guest, she walked through the rooms of my mind, but disturbed nothing, trod no dirt into the carpets. She ran her fingertips along surfaces and examined them, then nodded approvingly. No, she said softly, but you would if you could. He spoils everything, doesn't he? I flushed and nodded. The steam that had never been let off filled me right then. For the first time, somebody understood. The relief was painful. Some people do, the woman murmured. They do not care how long others labour to create, to restore, to clean, to preserve. They must always mar, destroy, stain. There's nothing I can do about it. My voice sounded mangled and tearful. And if you could do something? She asked softly. Something to stop your brother spoiling anything pristine ever again? You mean, apart from throwing him off a cliff? I gave a hasty-sounding laugh to show it had been a joke. Somehow it hadn't sounded like one. She smiled. Oh, nothing that drastic would be necessary. I was starting to get a tingle-kneed feeling, as if the precipice was much closer than it actually was, as if it had been inching towards us during the conversation. Yes, I said. I'd like it if all the spoiling and breaking just stopped. Then bring him here, she said. And I did. I walked over to Dill, my face burning, and a terrible warmth in my chest. I called him over. I picked him up. I walked back to the woman at the fence. I didn't know what would happen. I would love to tell you that I thought it would be nothing terrible, but deep down, I think I knew. What's his name? She asked, giving him a smile bright as dewdrops. Dill. Hello, Dill. She leant over the fence and kissed him on the forehead. Dill's blue eyes widened, and he screamed. When the woman straightened, I almost expected to see her kiss seared into his forehead, but there was no mark. I set him down and watched him stumble away with a feeling of shock and growing guilt. I turned back to the woman just in time to see her gloved fingers delicately plucking a small black bead from her mouth, as if she were discreetly spitting out a cherry stone. "What did you do?" I demanded. She did not answer. Instead, she touched the bead to a bracelet of similar beads on her wrist, where it joined their ranks smoothly and impossibly. And then she turned and strode away, down the path towards Creve. Watching Dill blunder towards the front door, I felt my heart lurch. His stubby feet were not sinking into the snow. He left no prints behind him. I have guilt dreams sometimes, dreams where I've killed somebody. I can't remember who or why, but I know I've done this terrible thing I can't undo, and I just can't believe it. When I wake up, the relief is indescribable. Walking into the house after Dill, I was filled with the guilt dream feeling, but this time I knew I really had done something terrible, and I wasn't going to wake. Mum was on a ladder mending lights, her brown and grey curls scrunched back. She grimaced when Dill ran wailing to the base of the ladder. "Chloe, can you take him? Give him his colouring books." Dill thumped my shoulders while I carried him to his playroom, but he settled when I laid out his crayons and Disney colouring book. He loves colouring. It's the only time he's quiet. It's like a drug. He loves vivid shades, particularly reds and blues. He can't keep his scribbles inside the line, but he tries. Mum says he's artistic. And sometimes when I watch him colour, my mind is quiet too. I start to think that maybe he's just a fat little bottle bursting with stuff, energy and craziness that comes out in screaming and breaking, except when it can come out in red and blue. Today was different, however. Dylan curled his fist around a red crayon and drew it hard across Goofy's muzzle. Nothing happened. No colour, no mark, not even a dent from the pressure. He scratched it desperately to and fro, so hard that the page should have torn. It didn't. Goofy smiled back, unblemished. For a few seconds, Dill could only croak, his mouth making rubbery, trembling shapes. And then his scream was like an earful of molten lead. I hushed him in vain, bounced him on my knee, and sang him songs, Big Sister of the Year. I felt like such a hypocrite. As lunchtime approached, a new dread seized me. What if he can't touch anything, including food? What if he can't eat? Mum was too busy to fix Dill's lunch, so I took care of it, my heart hammering. As it turned out, he could eat, or at least, he could eat things I'd chopped, mashed, or broken up for him. But he couldn't cut or chew things that were intact. His teeth couldn't dent biscuits. Grapes went into his mouth and then came out whole and glossy with spit. I started to understand. The woman in the snow had promised that Dill could never spoil anything pristine again, so he couldn't affect anything pure, clean, or whole. He isn't going to die, I told myself. It could be worse. But as I struggled through my lasagna, his future existence unrolled before me. What kind of life could he have if he could only eat food broken up by someone else? What would happen when he went to school? He would never be able to write, draw, sign his name. Maybe not even type into a keyboard. He'd never be able to open envelopes, jars, tins, packets. He would be a freak forever, sliding off the surface of the world like raindrops off waxed cloth. By mid-afternoon, The sky was dim as twilight, and more flakes were flurrying down. I could still hear Dill's desolate wailing while I scrubbed floors, bleached toilets, and scraped the lime off shower screens. Nothing I did was undone. No thrown orange juice beakers left sticky patches on the carpets. No jam murals appeared in the corridors. I was tense all the while, knowing that any moment Mum would hurry to Dill to see what was wrong. She would take one look at him and know, using her extraterrestrial mother powers. And then I would hear her accusing voice calling for me. But the hours passed, and she didn't go to him. After a while, it started to creep me out. She just went on working. His loudest screams made her frown, but in a distant, distracted kind of way. When I brought him to the kitchen for dinner, I found that she had laid 2 places at the table, but hadn't brought out Dill's high chair. Dill ran over to her, yanking with desperation at her skirt, but she just stared down at him as if trying to remember who he was. And then she walked away to the fridge, leaving him to topple and sprawl in her wake. My blood ran cold. I went over and picked him up. Dill, her angel, her favourite boy, the one who had left 1,000 marks upon her heart and memory, bruises and jam smears, tiredness creases and crayon hearts. Before my eyes, those marks were fading like footprints covered by falling snow. She was ceasing to care about him. Soon she would not remember him at all. Dill's screaming stopped eventually, his voice worn down to a miserable, quavering croak. Mum's coldness seemed to break his world in 2. For once, he did have a reason to cry, a reason I understood. Dill was finding out how it felt when your pain didn't count. Dill had fallen into my world, but he had plunged past me into the darkness and was still plummeting. I spent what time I could with him, but disasters kept dragging me away. A pipe burst, flooding the cellar, and I had hardly finished dealing with that when I had to go out and shovel snow off the ornamental bridge so it didn't give. I bought Dill his truck and left him to play in the hall. While I was shoveling, my mind spiralled through nightmares. What would happen to Dill when I was at school, if Mum forgot he existed? What if nobody ever cared if he lived or died? What if all the crazy stuff inside him could never get out through colouring or breaking or getting attention? Would he go mad? I thought he would go mad. As those thoughts were going through my head, I looked up and saw the woman of the snows standing between our 2 pines, staring at me with a face like carved ice. She wore a dress of furs, so white it merged into the surrounding snow. Her shoulders and long neck were bare, and her hair was loose. She was glaring at my shovel blade, embedded in her sweet, luminous snow. Somehow she seemed taller than before. Dropping the shovel, I ran towards her, but she melted amid the flurry of flakes, became a pattern of shadows amid the smooth snow hummocks. I stumbled around for a while, calling out, but she had vanished. I came back to find Mum sweeping the step and the front door ajar. Dill's truck lay abandoned on the threshold, and there was no sign of him. "Mum, where's Dill?" I stared around at the thickening blizzard. "Did Dill come out here?" Mum did not seem to hear. "Come on in, Chloe," she said. "I'll go make us some cocoa." I sprinted around the house, flinging open doors, but Dill was nowhere to be found. He must have wandered out past Mum without her giving him a second glance. And now he was somewhere on the icy cliff paths, and there weren't even any tracks for me to follow. I didn't try to reason with Mum or call the rescue services. Even if they started searching for Dill, within minutes they would forget what they were doing or stop caring. Instead, I wrapped up warm, grabbed a torch and ran out. For an hour I scrambled along the cliff paths, yelling Dill's name. Every shadow or half-buried stump looked like his sprawled shape. Every note in the wind sounded like his wail. Soon my feet and hands were aching with the cold. The dangerous thing about despair is that it's the kind voice in your head. It's the one that says, "Oh well, you tried your best. There wasn't anything you could have done. Time to give up." I couldn't give in. The voice was right, though. I wasn't going to find Dill this way. So I changed tack and went in search of her. I knew where she would be. There's a broad, high headland where the ground is smooth and unbroken, a perfect laying ground for snow. It has fine views of the other heads as well, just the place for somebody who wants to admire their white, velvet, smooth domain. Sure enough, when I huffed my way up the slope, there she was, standing at the highest point, star-pure, gleaming, all disguises cast aside. Something inside me quailed and bowed when I saw her. She made the snow look dingy in comparison, and for a crazy moment I wanted to throw myself down and polish it so that it was fit for her to tread. She looked at me and smiled. I felt like a scuff mark on the world. "No," she said. The question I had not asked soured in my mouth. "No, I will not give him back his power to spoil. I am disappointed that you would ask it." I swallowed hard. I stared around me at the lifeless purity of the scene. I thought of Dill and Mum. I found the smile I used in reception and spent a moment straightening it on my face. "That's not why I'm here," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. One of her eyebrows rose slowly. Perhaps she didn't believe me, or perhaps I had her interest. "You're beautiful," I said. "You're flawless. I try so hard to be one of the people who make the world spotless. But when I look at you, I see how grubby and clumsy I am. I want to be more like you. Whatever you took away from Dill, can you take it away from me, too?" Her gaze felt cold as it touched my scruffy hair, red nose, frayed gloves. She smiled again. "Very well," she said, and moved towards me. As she drew closer, I kept my head bowed, breathing hard and forcing myself to stay still. She was 2 steps away, then 1, and my skin was stinging with a terrible, blistering cold. Even with my gaze lowered, I could see her stooping to plant a kiss on my forehead. And at the last moment, I ducked my head and snatched at the bracelet of black beads around her wrist. I yanked at the bracelet, and it gave. The beads sprang loose, but they did not tumble to the ground. Instead, they whirled into the air and surrounded me, a swarm of wheeling black blobs. The woman gave a thin sound of rage like a rising wind. It rose until the air shook, and I fled, half blinded by the flurry of white flakes and black motes. As I ran, the beads pelted me, seeking exposed flesh. When they found it, they clung and stung, burying their way into my skin. The more they did so, the less my limbs felt like my own. I tumbled repeatedly, crushing shrubs. I put my foot through the bridge outside the hotel and flung the front door open so hard its windows shattered. And then I blundered through the hallways and corridors, leaving mud and snow and blood from a cut hand everywhere I went. Mum had no patience with me. 5 minutes before, she had noticed that Dill was missing, and she had been searching for him frantically ever since. She was sure I must have left the front door open when I went out for my walk. Fortunately, we found his tracks in the snow and followed them to his huddled, whimpering shape behind the shed. Mum was so angry that she barely spoke a word to me for the rest of the night. No, things aren't back to normal. Not for me, anyway. Oh, Dill is much the way he used to be, and Mum's even more protective now after what nearly happened. But me, I'm hopeless. I spoil everything. I can't make a bed without ripping the sheets. I can't clean a window without breaking it. I can't join a conversation without dropping a big, fat, spiked truth into it, like an anchor through the bottom of a rowing boat. And when I sit down in front of a blank page or an unsullied screen, the words pour out, thousands of them. All my fears and feelings and dreams and rage, I can't stop them. I don't think I have a future in hotel cleaning. I don't think I'm a servant of the flawless anymore. Someday, perhaps, I can return to something like my old self, but for now I can't. For now, I've got a lot of spoiling to do.
This is an incredibly powerful tale, isn't it? On the one hand, it's very resonant of the teen experience of going through puberty and suddenly struggling with a body that doesn't fit, emotions that spill over, and getting almost everything wrong. It also strikes a chord with me for the pressure and anxiety of perfectionism. I see a lot of this in some of the students I teach, a need to never fall short, to live up to expectations, to earn an approval that maybe simply isn't coming, to deserve to be on the path we're on. It's an appealing trap. By being good enough and perfect enough and flawless, maybe the microaggressions and self-doubt and social pressures will just go away. Maybe we'll stop feeling the hurt. In the long run, there's a lot to be said for imperfection, failure, mess, and most importantly of all, self-forgiveness. If you've seen Inside Out 2, there's a similar message there, which perhaps isn't surprising given the context. Life is messy, especially for teenagers. For those of us who live with them, myself included, this week I'm going to remember to give them a little more slack. Join us again soon. We love bringing you the best audio fiction week after week, but we can't do it without your support. Your donations pay our authors, our narrators, our servers and our staff. Please consider supporting us with a monthly donation through either PayPal or Patreon. You can also review us on Apple Podcasts, request us on Spotify, and consider the stories we publish for award consideration. There are lots of ways you can help. Join the discussion on the EA Discord and visit on Twitter or Blue Sky at Cast of Wonders. Come say hello. Cast of Wonders is brought to you by editor Catherine Inskip, assistant editors Cup Jacob and Alicia Caparaso, associate editors Rebecca Arn, Tanya Adelit, Amy Brennan, Somtua Haseway, Becca Miles, Ray O, Samuel Poots, Pooja Prakabaran, Emma Smales, Denise Sudell and Rin Yi. Our editorial assistant is Amy Brennan, our community manager is Denise Sudell and our audio producer is Jeremy Carter. Cast of Wonders is part of the Escape Artists Foundation, a 501c3 non-profit, and this episode is distributed under the Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. That means you can download or listen to the episode on any device you like, but you can't change it or sell it. Our theme music is Appeal to Heavens by Alexei Nov, available from Promo DJ or his Facebook page. Thank you for listening.